Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming to me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, hello and welcome to Whistleblower Heroes, Everyday Heroes, and Educators here on Revolution Radio, and I'm your host, Ella. So I just want to say thank you for those that are here, and today's my first Tuesday show, so I just want to welcome the people listening. And so today I have a special guest. Her name is Bridgette Lyn. Is it Dolgoff, or how do you say your last name, Bridgette?
Yeah, Dolgoff.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bridgette. She's registered with the International Association of Medical Intuitive. In 2006, Bridgette began consulting for corporate and political geared business with a focus on creating economical cooperations. Bridgette became a full-scale activist and citizen lobbyist in her home state and nationally for food, alternative medicine, and environment in 2009. Bridgette is a sustainable Do you want to go ahead and tell them a little bit about yourself, Bridgette? Okay. I turn it over to you. You can fill in the audience with everything that you've done, all your great work.
Well, it's just a lot of it. So yeah, biodynamic farmer working on helping people to spiritually return back to Earth so that we can start fixing the problems of the Earth. And long-term project is doing a biodynamic full farm and rehabilitating combat veterans into the new farmers in America.
Great. Well, that's a lot of really great work, and I'm happy you're able to come on and share all this great information with everybody. So, I don't know, where do you want to start? Maybe go back, to the beginning if you like. Eventually, I'd like to hear a lot about, or hear some information about the Urban Farm Project. That's something that really interests me. So, wherever you want to start, you go ahead, Bridgette.
Okay. Well, I figured I wanted to kind of maybe talk about my background a little bit. I come from two really old bloodlines of, shamans and healers and prophets and herbalists and exorcists. My family's been dealing with, dark forces for a really long time on this planet. And I was born to two parents that both were severely handled by the government. So back in the days when, I don't think NASA's changed a whole lot, but, what people think, I love what David Icke says. David Icke says that what we think is going on planet Earth and what is really going on planet Earth are two totally, completely different things, and they don't even meet in the middle. So a lot of people have this idea of what NASA is, and NASA really hasn't been that way. NASA has really been used as weapons, electronic weapons. They used to use, I think they still use some remote viewers, but the remote viewers usually were their first course of action, and they kidnapped tons of people into the NASA program. One of those people was my real dad. He wasn't the dad that raised me because of all the issues that happened to him, but he was extremely clairvoyant. He was, it's where I get my shaman superpowers from. He basically was, NASA wanted him to come into the program because of all his abilities. And he had gone through different schools and colleges, and he ended up deciding that he was going to clean properties and clean houses of energies that were unwanted and dangerous. And he basically was attacked at a house way long before I was born. And NASA used a lot of their psychics to be able to do that. So the deal is that they would use remote viewers for, people think it's all about going back in time, but it's the past, present, and future that are happening simultaneously. So they can also remote view, or this is how they used the first weapons, humans, before they created electronic computer systems in order to be able to run these programs more efficiently.
Yeah, I think Russell Targ was one of the original creators, or one of the first people to kind of, for the government, get into remote viewing.
Yeah. So then what they would do is they would use their psychics. A lot of these people were actually kidnapped. So they would, there's a phone call in the background. Sorry about that.
No worries, it happens.
So then they would use their psychics that they would have. A lot of these people were kidnapped. I mean, a lot of people went into these programs. Openly when they were approached. But there were a lot of them who didn't really want to go into these programs because they were really talented and had abilities and knew what was going on in these programs. And some of these people wouldn't get out. I had a teacher, Lakota Sioux medicine woman, that I actually studied with for a year doing energetic healing. And she had been, basically kidnapped by NASA off her reservation. So, and she had to escape them. It was like a major ordeal.
How do they do that? How do they kidnap people under the nose of their community? Or,
Well, they always target the ones who are, number one, most gifted, and usually the ones that don't fit in.
So they start looking at the outliers of society.
Yeah, they look at the ones, the most gifted ones usually don't fit in. I mean, if you look at sometimes in tribal cultures, I'm not just talking about Native American, but other cultures. One of my really good friends, Mwangi Hassan, is a traditional healer out of Uganda. And, he's kind of an outcast because he does old school, healing work, which, in his tradition, they go into trance, they connect with their ancestors. So there's possession that's happening. And then the ceremony, once it's ended, the beings are not in their bodies or anything, but they get the information and stuff. And so there's this tendency towards people putting those people into a category of, satanic, which they're not satanic. They're original medicine people who contact, their ancestors to figure out what's going on with the earth, the people, the animals, the water, and how to go about setting it straight, clearing the energy that's causing the disease. But so in society, what happens is a lot of these people who are really powerful, they may not actually even fit in to their communities. And so it's easy for a wolf to, circle a caged quail. Let's just say that, until they finally, get that cage open and get that bird.
How long do you think it's been going on with NASA? How long do you think they've been working these type of programs?
Well, I don't know, but it goes back far, 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 far. Because after the initial creation, of the Earth, when the AI is what we call it now, moved in, it was basically controlled multidimensionally through lots of different kinds of ETs. And that's another huge issue, is that we had this really solid, amazing Earth program. A lot of communities, let's just say galactically, universally, multidimensionally, did this Earth project. And they created this Earth because if you were traveling by, say, spaceship or whatever else, it seemed to be in the center of a lot of traffic. And so what they did was they made Earth originally as a library. And so it would have every plant, flora, fauna, everything that could come from other planets. Other civilizations could come here, say they need to re-terraform their planet. They could pick up plants. They could pick up information. There was a holographic library that contained all this information. All the different extraterrestrials and multidimensional beings could upload information about themselves, their DNA, their genetics, whether they have biosuits, they don't have biosuits, how they travel. And so this is what Earth was originally established for. And so early on, you started getting a lot of, as there was traveling, you start getting ETs that actually wanted to come here and start creating their own biological material to harvest stuff that we had on the Earth, to take it back to their home planet. Not as we're working together, kind of, we'll take a little bit, we want it all. And a lot of it had to do with the damage that they have done to their own home planets, like the Anunnaki, and you go back to the clay tablets. And I think, the timelines are wrong. I think that a lot of this stuff happened a long, long time ago. I think that, the Anunnakis probably were here like way longer than they talk about when the first Adomon or the first Adam was created, that they created him. But there's also, too, a lot of other people on Earth that are hybrids from all different kinds of alien races, that we've been messed with in order to kind of create a slave planet. And then they harvest, a lot of the energy bodies or ISBs or whatever you want to call them to animate the biosuits. And that would be us. We're an animated biosuit.
What about like for organs? I've heard that theory as well, that they harvest us for the organs that that human beings can have.
Yeah, I mean, well, you have to realize there's a lot of restaurants on a lot of different planets where we are the meat of choice. So I know it's pretty extreme, but there a lot of people. I used to follow a guy who was a remote viewer for the government, and he had a YouTube channel. This was like 10 years ago, and he put some really cool stuff up. I mean, just like out of this world. And he ended up committing suicide because, he couldn't handle the stress anymore. But he put a lot of stuff up there about a lot of the, some of these reptilian races that, literally land their spaceships and eat children. I mean, this is why you have a lot of, blood sacrificing that goes on this planet, because it's the worship to these beings. It's just these people don't know who they're worshiping.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable. I mean, you hear about pedophilia, but that's just like a whole new level.
Well, that's the physical. Well, you know what? I've read stuff that I think might be true, that a lot of these, reptilian races, they kind of will come multidimensionally. Well, I've gotten people who are in the process of demonic possession that, are being raped by, like radically mind control raped by, multidimensional beings, which are, reptilians without biosuits. So, the control is so many different levels. And then it gets into a physical level. So they try to get people mind controlled, separated within their own self, using trauma and drama in order to create that separation. So people are end up in a mindset of barely surviving.
Right.
They can't really think about, and this is this whole new age stuff, where they're, like think positively, well, there's a lot of people who are having experiences that, that's not going to work for.
What do you suggest they do? Like if they're not able to have a positive outlook or, live in that kind of positive space just because they don't have that option, what do you suggest?
Well, they have to get help. I mean, they have to start working with real shamanic people. They need to really start having some pretty thorough energetic sessions to start help sewing their parts back together. I do a technique physically that's called a reboot that actually starts to remove all that stuff out of the memory of the biosuit and the brain. It takes a little bit of time, but it's fast and efficient. So, there's it's hard in the U.S. because we have been isolated from having alternative medicine. I'm talking about original medicine. We call it alternative in the United States, but original medicine that's based on indigenous, original, traditional family lines, in a lot of cases tribally worldwide, that these family lines carry out. We know a lot about Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine, but not as much as we could, because we're missing the components. Say you go to acupuncture school, you don't learn how the energy is and how it has to move. You learn the technical part of putting the needles in. And yeah, will that help a little bit? It will, but that's not the way it was designed. You know, it was designed to shift energy and bring parts back together, right? And getting them back into a solid current, you know, an electrical current in the body, which helps the brain, because the brain has a hard drive. And so if the body's like disconnected from the brain, then, and you don't have a good current, you're not conducting energy into your own system, because you're a power grid. You know, your whole body is a generating power. So if it's not all hooked up, the meridians and all this other stuff, you can't generate a current. So, and one of the things that I love that Bruce Lipton talks about, you know, he talks about how a lot of this stuff kind of has to come together in order for the switches to work in the proteins. Because, you know, there's positives and negative charges that go on that actually help you to regenerate yourself. So if you don't have enough energy and you don't have enough power, because of trauma, drama, or injury or accident, all these things are little post-traumatic stress disorders, and compounded as you go through life, become one major post-traumatic stress disorder, and it has to be unraveled so that you can have
some of the work
power.
you do. So some of the work you do can kind of help, you know, unravel some of that, you know, and I've worked with a lot of people with post-traumatic disorder, and, you know, it's a really tough thing to unwire. I don't even know. I mean, as much work as I did and as much as I learned working with other psychologists, it's really difficult to kind of assist people to move out of that.
Yeah, it has to be, you know, you have to start working on the energy levels. And in shamanism, that's one of the things that we really focus in on, is the generating of power, you know, so that you can get power back into your body. You can be your own, you know, electrical, you know, grid. And once you're your own electrical grid, then you can kind of work with other electrical grids.
Do you support some of the Eastern medicine though, or kind of integrating it into the work you do?
Yeah. Well, I have one of the people I work with in, I'm going to call it the dreaming world. And he actually, whenever I need a tune-up or I need fixing or whatever needs to happen, I go there into another world, and he has an apothecary. He was a shaman from Asian descent, and he learned how to cross over and create his own world in his physical body, leaving this world. So he still exists there. So periodically, whenever I need health care, whenever I need care or acupuncture, or sometimes like a good haya karate adjustment, then he will reach out to me, and then I'll go into that world and I'll spend a couple hours there with him getting fixed. And I have another lady who takes care of me, who passed over, same thing, in her physical body, into the dreaming world, and has her own place there. And sometimes she'll cross over here to help me. For example, I was at this hotel, I don't know, in 2010, I think. And I had just came from this really heavy workshop where we really did some heavy stuff. And when I was coming home, and I stopped at a hotel before I got back to Reno, in the middle of the night, half of my body was lifted up off the ground. This, for me, I know this sounds really crazy to listeners, but for me, this is pretty normal stuff. The physical world is not normal to me at all. It doesn't make any sense to me most of the time. Anyway, so from my rib cage down on my right side, was lifted up in the air all the way. My legs were lifted up in the air. I was on my side. The only thing that was laying on the bed still was my head and neck and part of my rib cage on the right side. And it was twisted. My body was twisted. So I woke up out of the sleeping state and I felt myself lifted, and then like almost stressed out, because sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I have to go, okay, is this my good people or these are the bad people, right? So, because the bad people do this kind of stuff as well. So, and then I heard the voice and she put her hand on me and I didn't see her, but she just said, surrender. And I knew it was her. So I just let go, and then she twisted me and it actually snapped every vertebrae in my whole back all the way up. I couldn't walk for 5 hours, but once I got up, and it took about 3 days to integrate the whole thing, then I was good to go. So, because I wasn't being able to utilize all the energy, the power, generated power from the workshop that I was at. And I needed a really big shift, and my physical body was just not in the condition that it needed to be in order to make the shift. So sometimes they have to come in. And so this is a lot of the work that I do on people in the physical world. So because I'm a traditional osteopath, always have been, I'm not a medical doctor, DO, they have a tendency to do more surgery, and there are very few that actually do hands-on work. A lot of the ones that come from Europe, Germany and stuff, do a lot more hands-on work. So I do a lot of this kind of work that I've studied with people here in the 3D world to do. And I've also gone to school for, and also I've been trained, on lots of other different levels.
Wow, that's interesting, and that's nice to know that there's an alternative to Western medicine, which really is, cover up all the symptoms with medication. It's a, multi-billion-dollar industry here in the States.
Yeah, I wouldn't, this is the thing is, I wouldn't go to a doctor at this point, even if I had a broken bone. I would contact my friend Mwangi in Uganda, and I'd have him set it long distance. Just because the doctors, this is a really tough concept for people. And even people that are in the common law movement, the original Constitution of the United States kind of movement, legal movement, they don't realize the doctors are the biggest fraud that there is in the United States. And it's probably possibly everywhere else, but they're the ones that actually sign this slip that turn you into stock, money, certificate. So when you're born and you're a live birth, so doctors, before we had doctors, licensed doctors that went through college, AMA, their doctors were doc attendants. They were under Admiralty law. So what they would do, the dock attendant, right, the law of the water, they would register as the ship came into that port. They registered everything in the berth of that ship onto that country's soil. We'll call it the U.S. soil. So everything that was live chickens, there was, 4 live chickens and 1 dead chicken. And then there was all these commodities. And so they create a register, certificate of registration of what came out of the birth of the ship. So when Admiralty law started being, that's the law of our courts, that's the law of the cops, that's the law of the doctors, that's the law of the hospital, it's the law of everything in the United States and other parts of the world. It was all started with the Vatican by doing christening of the birth, and then they were using energetically the babies as commodities, right? Which they can borrow against country to country to make money against us as slaves. So what they do is then the doctors came about, they created doctors, anything that needs a license, anything that needs a contract, a license is usually going to be, the background of it is going to be committed in fraud. Psychiatric is one of the biggest frauds that there is, because they needed somebody to be a doctor, to experiment in mental hospitals on all these people.
Yeah, that I definitely know about, and I understand, and I've had many discussions on this on air and off, and that is something that is concerning to me. Even though I worked in the field at one point, I've learned a lot since that point or since that time, and it's pretty disturbing. And I've talked to many people who have contacted me and told me stories that are, almost hard to believe, but I know better than that, and I do believe the stories. And I've talked to people who were in that field at one point who share similar information too. So it's something that needs some adjusting for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, so doctors, they had to make doctors. They're underneath Admiralty law, which is the law of the water, not the law of the land, not based on original constitution. So what happens is the birth, the ship, the mother comes into port, which is the hospital, and then she delivers, right? They unload what is in the berth of her ship, right?
Right.
And so they decide whether it's a live birth or a death or it's dead on arrival. If it's dead on arrival, they still make a stock certificate for it. I mean, nowadays they're so blatant about it that all death certificates are stock certificates. Just look at one so that they can make a huge amount of money, because once you come out, they give you a registered live birth certificate in a hospital. You get that birth certificate. It's also a stock certificate. And some of them at the very, very bottom, if you get a microglass, you can look at it. It'll say banknote of the United States of America. Okay, well, that's your baby is the banknote of the United States of America. You're not a free citizen. They're not a free citizen. And they're considered a commodity like cattle. So you wonder why they want to chip us, just like they do farm animals, right? To track farm animals through the process. So the doctors are like the hugest fraud of this. So all doctors are huge fraud. Their insurance, most of them kill so many people before they get out of, interning. And the hospitals just, turn a total blind eye and pay off the family. And they always pay everybody off what they want, because then it doesn't become public record of how many people that this doctor has killed and experimented on. I mean, their medical insurance is to practice medicine, not do medicine, not cure, not help, not make well. It's to practice. And then every time you go in for surgery, it always says exploratory surgery. What, you have to explore another human body? I mean, explore means like go to Mars, and we're going to go explore something we've never been before, right?
Yeah, good catch on the wording. I never thought about it.
Yeah, so the doctors are the ones that make the death certificates, right? So when you're born, you get your stock certificate, your birth certificate, and then what happens is that it goes to the part of it is registered with the government, and then they register you lost at sea. That's why under Admiralty law, if you go into a court, they treat you like a monster. If you look up the legal term in Black Law Dictionary, monster is born to a human mother. And so this is why they treat you the way that they do in the court systems, because to you, they're a monster because you're not alive. You were lost at sea. That's why your name is in capital letters. And then the government actually becomes a trustee of your estates and turns you into a trust, which is all capitalized. Your name is all capitalized. So doctors are at the heart of that fraud. And they were dock attendants, on maritime where the ships came in. And then they made a school for them that they could actually be like a real doctor. And, and so people follow what these doctors have to say. And a lot of these doctors, they have a lot of my friends who have been doctors who have resigned their licenses to become nutritionalists and stuff like that to help people cure cancer and all these other things. And I have friends that are immunologists that, resign their licenses or chose alternative routes to help people. And they didn't even realize they were, the major frauds for the government, registering live birth and the death certificates. So if you end up dying underneath the trust, they take out huge life insurance policies against you. That's why when you die, it's a stock certificate so that they can get paid. And a lot of them pull money and they put it on hedge funds. I mean, this is how they manage you. and your estate, and you'll never see anything from it. I mean, I actually we had an FBI guy for a while who was working with some other people that I know. I mean, he was like retired FBI or something like that, but he was actually going in and showing us our QSIP numbers and everything under our social security numbers and all the other identifiers, which are your names, your social security number, your driver's license number is an account number. You know, if you get a ticket or anything, they can pull a bond off you that you'll never even know about. So people get a mortgage and you go in there and you look at what the bank did underneath your mortgage for your house, and they pulled a $30 million bond the day that they okayed your mortgage that's riding on a hedge fund on the stock exchange. So everybody's making money off you as a corporation and you don't even know it. And
yeah, I've heard that theory. I've heard that from a dear friend of mine. She was explaining that, how it's a corporation and how, you know, and what it means, you know, how the control is over each individual, and basically stating what you were telling me right now.
Yeah, and the doctors are at the biggest part of the fraud. So a lot of the people that are in this movement, going back to the man on the land, common law movement, they forget to talk about, and I think because I've been in healthcare, you know, I've gone and done some internships like in hospitals and stuff like that, and I've worked with, you know, people that are out of the box doctors and immunologists and had clinics with them, and I always do all the energy instructional medicine. And I think because I've been around a whole bunch of these people, a lot of people in the underground kind of movements don't realize doctors are actually the axemen. You know what I mean? They're like the ones wielding, you know, the axes that actually destroy you as a person and give you up as a commodity from birth. And then register your death so the government can take all your assets that you've derived for them along the way. And you'll never find any of this out. It's all behind closed doors.
How much of the government do you think is involved with this?
Oh, well, let's just talk about the legislature of possession. You know, when I always wanted to stay away from the government. I didn't want to be, you know, become from my family lines. We tried to stay away from everybody. So in 2009, January 2009, I started getting attacked. So there's no licensing for the work I do. I don't do surgery. I don't hurt people. Never had a complaint against me. I get people off medications. I get them walking again. I get them well. And I work on the people that nobody is willing to work on. I work on people who have mass fusions, who've had mass emotional, mental trauma. Like I work on, like, I call it the last ditch effort, you know? So, the state of Nevada was trying to pass what was called the SB, I think it was like SB 69, which was the complementary medicine bill. But they decided before this bill had even gone before the legislature, even been presented in committee to be heard, they started a year before ousting all alternative medicine people out of their practices. Literally fake cease and desist with no judicial signatures. They were using the homeopathic board. They were using the massage board. They were using lots of different boards to get rid of these people. Now, mind you, Nevada has the only law on the books for alternative medicine. And it is a law that the Mormons created in 1919 based on frontier medicine, right? The law of the land, kind of law medicines kind of stuff. So we're the only state that really has a legitimate law to practice alternative therapies here. So they needed to get rid of them all. They and started coming after people. I think by the time that I was ousted, I started, you know, doing some research and talking to people and found out that there were like 250 people that this has happened to by the state, and they don't know what to do, you know. So I ended up working with a brilliant legal Mormon woman who had upheld the civil rights as best she could in the state of Nevada since 1974. And I became a citizen lobbyist, and I ended up working with them. I started learning law, reading bills, because, you know, people will be like, wow, that legislation sounds so nice. And it's so evil because the regular dictionary term sounds nice, but then you have to go to the Black Law Dictionary, the legal term, and it means something totally different. So most people don't even really understand what their legislation is talking about. So anyway, I fought against that bill, and I ended up fighting against 49 other bills that were horrific, like wanting to chip babies with the Real ID Act, like just unbelievable stuff. So anyway, so I basically worked like 100 hours a week. I was at the legislature like all the time. I was working with a few amazing people. But the Complementary Medicine Act would have removed everything, including shut down 1,500 supplement stores in the state of Nevada. People wouldn't have been able to buy a supplement even online. Like vitamin C could have been a felony if it wasn't prescribed by a doctor. If you had a vitamin store and you wanted to keep it, after this passed, you'd have to pay a doctor like $200,000 a year. In order for them to prescribe the vitamins in your store, if they felt like it.
Yeah.
So, and then it ousted, all kinds of other alternative people in the state, including myself. So I ended up fighting against that. But one of the things that I saw out the gate was that they were very aggressive, the legislative assembly people and the senators. And a lot of them were really uneducated. And they did not really care what they had to do in order to get their agenda through. And they were making, all of them at some point or another were making backdoor deals. I mean, you go on to the Nevada, at that time, I'd go on to the Nevada State Legislature site, and almost every senator on there, early on in their career, worked with Homeland Security. So, the level of all of this happening across, the government is huge. And I think Nevada, I call it the cabal state because we're the only state that doesn't have a separate constitution. A lot of people don't even know that. But if you go to other, states, they have a constitution, a state constitution, which mandates that all of their senators and their legislative people, their mayors and their governors, have to protect their citizens in their state first. In Nevada, we don't have that. I found out at the legislature that Lincoln, or somebody involved, sold Nevada for all the minerals and everything else to the federal government for the Civil War debt. So we adopted the federal constitution in the state of Nevada. The state of Nevada citizens were never allowed to vote in their own constitution, and we follow federal law. So it means that even if you get an attorney in the state of Nevada, they can't help you. They can negotiate your guilt even if you're innocent. And so it's really a tough place, and they're always doing like backhanded deals, and they're always trying to get rid of, anything that's good here.
Right. That's what it seems like, I guess. Definitely seems that way.
Yeah. So, but, the thing is, you just have to keep fighting. People always ask me, why do I have, a fairly good attitude? And it's like, well, you know what? I was born into a family of weirdos as far as people were concerned. And we were always under attack. So eventually you just accept that this stuff is happening. And you got to get out of, that self-pity stuff. I mean, sometimes things take me down, but I just get back up.
Right. Well, that's a good attitude. It is sometimes difficult to have a good attitude in the world we live in, but choose having a good attitude. It's might as well. We're here anyways, so try to see the good in the world and kind of focus on that despite everything.
Yeah, well, and the good is what I do. Good is what you do. That's the good. So if there's nobody doing good, then there is no good in the world, right? So yeah. It's like you have to keep doing it. So anyway, when I was born, so my dad was, was attacked by NASA. He was, mentally kind of destroyed. My mom, the same thing happened. My mom turned 18. She was being handled by a guy that they called a blonde James Dean, who supposedly came from a really wealthy family on the East Coast. And though his family never came to California, they got married, and then he took her to the East Coast. And as soon as she left, nobody heard from her. And she ended up spending like 3 or 6 months in a mental hospital where she was given electroshock therapy. And then he and his family ended up having the marriage annulled. And then the mental hospital called my grandmother eventually, and my grandmother had to send, because they were poor, a bus ticket so that they could put my mom, who was like totally just mentally destroyed, on a bus, and sent her back. And so my family never really talked about this because they didn't really understand, like, the whole context of it. But the deal was that she was like totally handled way long before I was born. And my feelings and knowledge about that was that they were really trying to destroy my parents before they came together at the point and created me, and I came through. So I haven't incarnated into this planet. This was like the first time I was sent by my star family here. And I really feel like they really tried to destroy my parents, which they did a pretty good job. I mean, my real father couldn't even raise me. And I didn't even really know where he was for like 18 years. And then it was another setup. October last year, 2016, I get a call from Washington State saying that he died, and I was his only family, blah, 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 blah. And I had to go up there. And when I went to his apartment, it was a setup. You could just tell. Right. It was a total setup. So it was really hard to find him because he had gone so far underground that, and I think that he had to stay away from me because he didn't want to drag a lot of this stuff towards me either, what was going on with him. So I had to grow up with a mom who was pretty much mentally destroyed, who was kind of a zombie. I mean, she still had these amazing gifts. And I think that she tried, but I don't think that she could ever be who she was before. And there was no possibility of her becoming something new, because she was zombieized for so long, drugged and raped and given medications and electroshocked for no reason. And just because, she came from this old bloodline. And also I think a lot of it had to do with me coming into this world. Like, they were really trying to stop it. I came in the second wave of Star Kids, and a lot of them that came in, Dolores Cannon talks a lot about it, but a lot of us didn't make it. The first wave got it way worse. They're older than me. I'm 50 this year, so they'd be like, close to 60. And a lot of them ended up committing suicide, drug and alcohol-induced suicides. Mental hospitals were still open till, the 80s, until Reagan abolished them. So we were dragged off. A lot of us had abilities, so parents didn't want us. They would consider us, something wrong with us, even though, some of them could do crazy things. Like, one of the first things that I did as a kid was raise bugs from the dead. I would find dead bugs and do work on them and heal them alive, kind of a thing. So you have kids that are like that, you're going to definitely put them in mental hospitals because you're not going to be able to deal with them. So
what do you think we can do, though, for the sake of our children? So many people have children and we want a better world for our kids. What kind of power, what kind of control do we have over all of this?
I think a lot, and before we go, I'd like to really say something about Mary Rodwell. And, over my life, I have tons of experiences with ETs, good, bad, and different. My star family, I sometimes have direct contact with them. Sometimes they just send me things. I dream about something and I find it out in the desert and I pick it up and there's like a download, or it's like a communication. And then sometimes they pull me directly up and have a conversation with me. But a lot of these UFO people, I've contacted a lot over the years, like all kinds of different UFO organizations. And, I try to tell them about some of my experience. And I have a YouTube channel where I lightly talk about a lot of my experiences. And it's Consciousness of Economics and Urban Farm Project YouTube channel, in case people are interested. And I contact them and I send them my YouTube channel and, look through the stuff, blah, 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 blah. And, I always get the same thing, like this cold shoulder, because they need to stay within their parameters or their boxes. And they're always sending me these tests. Oh, take these tests. But they only want the information that they want. They don't want to hear anything else that's past that, right? So even in the supposed UFO communities and movements, people like me are completely ostracized. Like, they don't even want to add our information, and they don't even want to talk to us. They don't even want to interview us, because I think that they're government controlled, or they're demonically, energetically controlled to a certain extent. And it keeps them from continuing to contact me and have an interview with me. And I've had experience with all kinds of bird ETs and like all kinds of ETs, plus my star family. And sometimes they come with me. Sometimes they'll come and visit me. In 2014, they came and visit me with 200 other members from other places, you know, other than this world. But they don't want to deal with me. And then in 2014, I had like some serious stuff that happened, and I ended up traveling in my car. I call it like the 4-month vision quest. And I ended up in rest stops and stuff. I had to go across the United States, and I couldn't get back. And I had heard about Mary Rodwell, and so I contacted their organization in Australia. And she actually, after this, I was really terrified that she was actually had hands-on with star children, because she did not appear to be who she was. So I ended up contacting their organization and saying, look, I need to get back to Reno. I need some money. I need some safe people to be with. I was being majorly hounded by some dark energies because I was isolated, you know what I mean, and alone.
Right.
And I was having a really hard time, and they were making communication difficult and everything else. So I was like majorly being targeted. And I don't mind if they kill me, but I don't want to be maimed for a long time before I die, right? I'd rather go from one place to the other and not be like maimed. So I ended up emailing her saying, hey, you know, I'm a star kid. I'm an adult. I've got this stuff going on. Do you guys have any contacts in the United States? Or I could just car camp in their driveway until I can make arrangements, get some donations or whatever, get some money borrowed so that I can get on the road, you know, and keep on going. And then she sent me this email saying like, no, we can't help you. We don't have any contacts. You know, we have no money like to give you or anything else like that. Not even asking me how I know I'm a star kid, you know what I mean? Not even asking me for any personal history. So then she says this in the email, like, well, I could offer you a counseling session. I'm thinking, you're not a star kid. You have no idea what being a star kid is like, you know, on this planet. And counseling, you're not a counselor, you're a nurse. You're like a registered nurse. So I kind of sent her a nasty email back. And after that, I've been like an advocate against her, because I don't know who she's working for or who she's being mind controlled. But the thing that terrifies me the most is she's filing. She goes out and videotapes and talks to these families and these star kids, and she's registering their abilities, right? She's registering all this stuff. It's going into a file, right? So that everybody can know kind of what's going on. So to me, that's bad. That's a super bad thing, because this planet is not in a place yet that kind of stuff should be like, you know, totally out in the open, that the abilities that these kids have. And mine were hidden, you know, under my family, and slowly, you know, like I've done good work with it. You know, I've kind of found my way, in order to kind of help the public. But when you have like, you know, a 2-year-old kid that's opening and closing flowers and who is levitating, you know, you don't want that information out there. You don't want it like photographed, you know what I mean? You don't want it going into like a NASA database, because the technology that NASA has now is weaponized stuff. You know, they could kill that kid. They could.
Yeah, everything seems to be weaponized, even 5G. That's one thing I do know about. Yeah.
5G is horrifying. Well, you know, what's 5G? fifth dimension that all the new age people talk about. And then you have all these new age people going, oh, I've been so dizzy lately. I heard a friend of mine said, I'm hearing voices. I said, that's the 5G coming online.
Yeah, it's just not good for the kids either. I mean, all the kids now, since Wi-Fi has been around, almost every kid has some kind of ADD, ADHD. It's just
but okay,
not
so
healthy for the brain.
Right, but this is what's most frightening. A lot of this damage is being done to them as a fetus. And then I just recently found out that it was like the most horrifying thing I've ever uncovered, actually. I've been working on late in the last 2 years, rebooting and structurally helping babies and toddlers. And I've had more in the last 2 years in my practice than I've ever had in 30 years. So there's something wrong. When you look at the spine of a baby and it looks like a 50-year-old person that's done hard labor, there's some serious problems. And there's all kinds of herniated vertebrae. I mean, more so than birth trauma does a lot of that kind of stuff, can lateralize the baby from birth into one hemisphere, usually in the left hemisphere, which is reptilian, which makes them overreactive. But what they're doing now over the last few years is that as soon as the woman goes into the hospital for a drip, they get the IV, they're automatically inserting what they call PIC or potassium. Protectant. Well, anyway, my brain just went like bye-bye. Anyway,
brain fart.
Yeah, it's an actual chemical that they use. It can be natural when women go into labor, but they've created like a synthetic chemical, and they would use it in emergencies. Like say the woman's been, in labor for 5 or 6 hours, or it's getting dangerous, and they would inject it so that it makes the uterus contract super hard to force labor, or say the term of the baby's gone too long, they'll use it. But it's supposed to be used for emergencies only. Now they're giving it to them as soon as they go into the hospital. And I met this nurse who was at this laundromat. It's so weird how I meet people because, I pray about this stuff, like give me the information, show me the way to the information, show me what's going on. So that
synchronistic events happen.
Yeah. And then I met this nurse at this laundromat, and she said that she had quit nursing. She'd been a nurse for, pediatrics for a long time. She had dealt with women in gynecologist offices, and babies and sauna, all the stuff. And she said that she found out recently, because she went to this workshop by this doctor who was like a whistleblower. I don't know what his name is, and he's blowing the whistle because they're giving him the PEC like right out the gate. And the doctor says that it's, like hitting the baby over the head with a baseball bat, because they have soft tissues and bones, and their head isn't even like sealed up. There's like a big hole in there. So when they're in that uterus and it's contracting like a mofo, it's actually battering the fetus severely. I mean, they're
that
lucky.
Actually makes some good sense to me.
They're lucky they're being born halfway okay. But so this is why all these babies that I'm seeing is because they're literally, traumatizing them in such a way. So think about that. Think about if that labor goes on for 10 hours like that. And that PEC is like making the uterus contract so hard that it's literally beating the baby to death.
Yeah. What do you suggest then? Just natural childbirth? Tub births?
Well, the thing is, I think people have to do a lot of research, because there's also not, on the home birth section, there's a lot of deaths that are happening. And because a lot of midwives don't have insurance policies or anything like that, the families can't go into court and at least, try to get a civil, remedy. So a lot of them, they don't go after. So you got to find somebody, like maybe a nurse who has decided that, the whole doctor birthing wasn't for her, but she has a lot of medical training, and that, in case there's an emergency, there's an emergency that happens. And then she went into midwife and went through the college and, became licensed as a midwife. I think I think people really need to do some research, but that's what I would recommend, because you don't know if there's going to be an emergency, and you're going to need somebody who can perform CPR on a brand new fetus, you know, who can make sure that, you know, the blood pressure and everything's okay, that everything is going smoothly, and know when to call it and get that woman and her baby to a hospital if necessary. So the sad part is, like, we have to kind of maybe blend the two. And try to find people who have tons of experience on either side. And then hopefully somewhere in the middle, they're doing the right thing.
Right. Yeah. It's just a tough world to navigate. What about like foods? What do you recommend for, you know, foods that are nourishing to the human body?
Oh, you know, unless you grow up on a farm, you should really stay away from everything dairy and everything meat. And you should really eat vegan and raw food wherever you can. I think like right now, like 60% of my diet is fruit. And then the rest is pretty much vegetables. But I just recently got over, I had brain cancer in my 30s, which I totally cured myself. And I just had lots of amazing people around me for the things that I didn't know. But recently, I just cured myself from a second round of cancer. So last winter, I had a friend of mine send me some microbial medicine from Germany. And I went through, and the microbes cleaned out all the masses and tumors. I had 8 masses and then 2 tumors that came out. And then because I had a tumor in my back. So we cleaned out the internal naturally cancer, and then it took me a year fighting the cancer in my back. But one of the things she told me was that I had to get off of dairy because it was a lymphoma type cancer on my back. And so, you know, you're always like, yeah, okay. So,
well, I just want to say, Bridgette, give your website real quick.
Oh, COE-LynLLC.com.
So everybody check that out, and don't forget to donate to our station, Revolution Radio, at freedomslips.com. You know, let's keep these stations alive, guys. Thank you, Bridgette.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Take a look around, kid. What do you see? Homes being foreclosed, people working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table and still drowning in debt. Don't get me wrong. This country was founded on great ideals and principles. They've all been ruined by the banks. Open your eyes to banks that are robbing you. You know who my favorite president was? Who? Thomas Jefferson. Because he saw all of this coming and tried to stop it. He fought the banks. JFK too, and they killed him for it. The banking institution is more dangerous than an army, he said. He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves